Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? Here on Behind the Star, we share stories about the Orange County Sheriff's Office, Central Florida's largest law enforcement agency. From forensics to dispatch to the deputies on patrol, we'll talk to the brave men and women who protect our community. This is Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. My name is Jon Busdeker, your host here at Behind the Star, and I'm going to get into it pretty quickly today, but I just want to remind everybody that if you're not following us on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, do that. We post a lot of great content up there and videos and photos of what's happening here at the Sheriff's Office. Also, if you're looking for a job, we're always hiring here at the Sheriff's Office. So if you're interested in that, go to OCSO.com. And so I'm excited today because I know this gentleman a little bit because we've worked on a video together and it's up on our website, and I'll direct you to all that here in a second. But I'm here with Reserve Chief Deputy Ross Wolf. And Ross, welcome to Behind the Star.
Thanks. It's great to be here, John.
So I mentioned at the beginning that we worked a little bit together on a video project that I had posted earlier this month, or last month, it's June already, about reserve deputies, and it took a little while. It was a long process, but that's just because of sometimes videos take a while. So Ross, why don't you first explain what exactly is a reserve deputy?
Well, reserve deputy is a citizen police officer. A reserve deputy is someone who volunteers their time to serve in the function of a police officer. And in this case, for Orange County Sheriff's Office, there's reserves throughout the country, actually. But for Orange County Sheriff's Office, our reserves are out there volunteering and doing the job of a police officer.
And I think this is really fascinating because for me, before I started here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, which was about a year and a half ago, I had no idea that people actually did this job for volunteered to do this job. And even when you told me about this and I learned about it, I was still a little surprised. With reserve deputies, the folks that do this, you mentioned they're just regular people a lot of times, and I guess all the deputies here are regular people, but they're really people that just have regular jobs that work here on a volunteer basis.
That's right. Most people in society have heard of volunteer firefighters, but most people have never heard of volunteer police officers, and you're absolutely right. They're members of the community. A lot of our reserves here in Orange County are actually retired from full-time. But we do have about 50% of our unit that's made up of folks who just have some other career and are volunteering their time to do this.
So how many people are reserve deputies here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office? Because I should preface this. We have about 2,500 employees that work here at the Sheriff's Office. About 1,600 or so are full-time deputies here at the Sheriff's Office. So how many are reserve deputies?
Right now, about 70.
Okay. All right. Now, is that a lot? Do we need more? Do we need less? Or
Well, we've been more. And in the recent history of the reserve unit, we've actually been up to more towards 100 range. And we're actually kind of a little low right now.
Okay.
But I'd like to see us back up above 100. But we've got a great group of people, and they're out there working their tails off to help. Yeah.
So when you say working their tails off, what are they doing? Are they doing filing and doing all that, or are they out on the streets?
Well, a reserve can do anything that a full-time law enforcement officer can do. So in some cases, they might be working cases. They might be helping out in cold case investigations. They are law enforcement officers, so they can actually go out and make an arrest if they develop probable cause in the course of an investigation. But most of our reserves are out there doing patrol work. So they're literally out there in patrol cars, working, answering calls, going to calls for help, calls for assistance, doing traffic stops, helping out on roadways with traffic crashes, those kind of things. So everything that a police officer can or does with the Orange County Sheriff's Office, reserves do.
So if you were somebody out there in Orange County and you were to see one of these reserve deputies out in the field, would you know that they're reserve deputies, or they just look like everybody else?
No, they look like everybody else. They are wearing the same exact uniform. They are the same identification as every other deputy with Orange County Sheriff's Office has. They have the same insignia, same badge, and they go out there and do the same job. So you wouldn't be able to tell the difference as a citizen.
So you mentioned that some of the people that do this, they're retired law enforcement officers, and maybe they do this, I don't want to say on the side, but they do this as volunteer. But there's other people that work regular jobs that do this. Is it about a 50-50 split, you said?
Yeah, it's about 50-50, and that it changes a little depending on how many people we have in the unit and who's doing what. But so we have people who own businesses. We have firefighters who spend their days doing, or actually spend a couple days a week being a firefighter, and then a couple days a week doing reserve deputy stuff. We have pilots in reserve policing. We have teachers, everything you can think of. We've got people out there, nurses. I'm trying to come up with all the jobs that everybody does in their private life.
Yeah, like you said, I know there's when I worked on this video for the reserve unit, which you can see on our YouTube page and our Facebook page, I talked to one gentleman. He's the dean of students at Winter Park High School, and there's another woman, Brandy. She's a nurse now at Advent Health. She was a full-time deputy here at the sheriff's office. She decided to do another career path, nursing, which is a very honorable career, and she still wanted to keep doing policing and being a deputy, and so now she's a reserve deputy, which is great. And it kind of shows that, you know, sometimes you're into this profession and it's in your blood and you want to keep doing it, and you might not want to do it full time anymore, but there's still opportunities to go out there and do it.
Yeah, a lot of our former full-time deputies that come into the reserve unit do it because they just love this job. It's a calling. It's something that they want to do. It doesn't matter. In some cases, they find a job that's better paying or that meets their opportunity requirements for hours they work or whatever in a profession other than law enforcement. But they can't give this up because it's part of who they are. And you know what? Honestly, those are the people that spend the most time because this is something that's important to them to give back.
So how did you end up here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, and how did you become Reserve Chief Deputy?
Well, I'll make a long story as short as I can, John. I started out as a volunteer, actually. I went through an auxiliary academy, and auxiliaries in the state of Florida are able to do all the same things that a police officer can do, and actually we have some auxiliaries in our reserve unit, but they have to be with a full-time person in order to do the duties of a law enforcement officer. So I started out as an auxiliary. I went through the academy and worked all the time with other full-time deputies. I was working in another job in the private sector, was making good money, but I wasn't happy in what I was doing. So I actually put in an application to become a deputy sheriff with Orange County, went through the full-time academy, and I was a deputy and a detective, a field training officer with the sheriff's office, and actually earned my doctorate degree in that time. And UCF made me an offer that I couldn't refuse.
All right, so like the Godfather, yeah.
Right. And so,
I like that, though, Dr. Deputy. I like that. You don't see that very often.
That's right. So actually, we have more than one in our unit now. Actually, it's more common than you would think. So I went to work for the University of Central Florida full time as a faculty member, and I'm a professor now.
And that's your full-time job.
And that's my full-time job. That's correct.
Okay.
And so after I went to UCF, or at the same time I went to UCF, I decided to stay on as a reserve, and I've been doing it ever since.
Oh, and how long is that? How long have you been with the Orange County Sheriff's Office total?
So it's coming up on 30 years.
Oh, wow.
This year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And how much of that have you been reserve and reserve deputy?
So all but 5 of it has been as a volunteer.
Okay.
So I was 5 years as a full-time deputy.
Okay, so a long time.
A long time, that's right. Yep.
So how does this work? I mean, let's say I'm somebody who maybe I have another job here in Central Florida and I want to be a reserve deputy. What do I have to do?
Well, I wish I could tell you it's an easy path to just start out and become a reserve deputy.
We don't just give everybody a badge.
Well, you're exactly right. It's a long process, and there's a good reason for that. First of all, there's a lot of background clearance and doing the whole human resources hiring part of it.
And we've talked about that here on the podcast. If you've missed that episode, go back and listen to the one about background investigations. It was a fun one because I had to go through it as well, and it was a fun podcast. Not so fun on the background investigation.
Yeah, and it can be lengthy, too. It can take some time to have all that done. So that's the first piece of it, because we want to make sure that all our reserves meet the same background check as all of our other sworn officers. So, and then there's the academy. So there's the exact same academy that a full-time person would go through, you can go through to become a reserve. And they actually run it at night.
And talk about how long is a normal academy? Is it 4 months, 5 months?
A normal academy is about 5 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the reserve one the exact same or a little different?
Actually, if you had your days free, you could go to the regular police academy that's 5 months. You could do that, and that would still work towards your reserve because it's the exact same academy.
Yeah.
But a lot of the men and women who join the reserve unit straight from not having ever been police officers before, they'll go to the nighttime academy, and that lasts almost a year because it's only at night. It's Monday through Thursdays, and then most Saturdays throughout the year.
So it's a huge commitment.
It is, and that's just the academy training. So once you finish the academy, then you have to do the training that Orange County requires, and that's a long process too. We give our reserves 2 years to complete all the mandatory what we call basic recruit training, BRT, and field training to get up to the same speed that a full-time deputy is out on the road.
And the field training is when you're kind of paired with another deputy, and you go out and you see what they do, you learn from them, but it takes time, and you got to be on the road to do it.
That's right. They're sitting with you. They're teaching you methods and processes and paperwork and procedures of the sheriff's office. At the same time, you're learning and becoming able to be solo by the end of it. So they kind of turn the reins over to you during the field training process. Yep.
So once I become a reserve deputy, and let's say I've gone through the field training and I'm good to go, I'm ready to go out there. How often am I allowed to work? Do I work every day? Do I work every week? Do I work every month? Like, is there a requirement or like a minimum?
Yeah, there are minimums. I'm happy to say that most of our reserve unit does well beyond what the minimums are. But to be a reserve, an active reserve with the Orange County Sheriff's Office, you have to do a minimum of 12 hours of police work every month, and then we have a 4-hour training meeting that you have to attend. So it's 16 hours total per month that you have to do.
So basically like 2 days almost, or kind of roughly.
But a shift, if you go out and work a patrol shift, it's 12 hours.
Okay.
So you can actually just, if you're doing the 12-hour shift, you can do one shift a month, and you're fine with the training that we do. But again, most of our reserves go well beyond that.
Yeah, and so some of these reserved, as I said, when you go through the if you watch the video that I worked on, and it's up on our website, you kind of see a lot of these reserve deputies, they kind of work where they want to work, or at least they kind of request different places. And so if you watch the video, I know one of the deputies, I think it was Sector 5, and he likes working out there, so that's where he works. And that's kind of Apopka, Pine Hills area. Another one works in Sector 6, which I think is more like Disney, and that's just where he chooses. Is that how it works? You kind of pick where you want to go?
Yeah, Sector 1 is Apopka.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. I'm still learning. I've been here a year and a half. I need a map on my wall that tells me where all the sectors are.
Yeah, that's okay. As a reserve, though, you really can pick and choose where you work. Once you're off of field training, you can pick and choose where you work. And really what you do is you call the supervisor, or you email the supervisor ahead of time and say, hey, I want to work on this day at this time. And the supervisor okays that, because you have to have someone out there who's actually, just as in full-time policing, there's got to be someone who's watching over and supervising the work that you're doing out there. So the supervisor approves it, you go out and you work in that area. So you can work in any sector, any patrol, and actually once you've been on, you can actually get some specializations. We have reserves who do mounted patrol, so they've learned how to ride the horses and done all the mounted patrol training, and they can go out and work with mounted patrol, or motorcycles, or marine patrol, which is on the boats. So we have reserves who do all of those areas. And we actually have some who fly with the helicopter too. They're observers in the helicopter. So
they get to do all the fun jobs as well.
Right. So you can choose, you can pick and choose, but you really want to go where the agency has some need at least. So you don't want to be an extra person where they don't need somebody. So we're always looking to help out where we can, where manpower needs are.
Is it often where people that have, I want to say regular jobs, 9 to 5 jobs during the week, do they typically do a lot of their hours on the weekends, or just, I like I said, with this one deputy who, he's a dean at Winter Park High School. I think he has a lot of the summers off, and so he can do a lot of work in the summer and sort of spend his time doing that. But I would assume most people kind of do this on their weekends if they can.
Well, yeah, whenever it fits with their work schedule.
Okay.
So we do have some some people who have night jobs. For example, the nurse you mentioned, she works night times, so she wants to continue to work night times opposite when her shift rotations are. So she will work those nights. We have some reserves who work daytime on a Saturday, but a lot of reserves do like working either Friday night or Saturday night if they have a regular Monday through Friday kind of regular job, so that they can get their reserve time in on the weekend.
So why does the sheriff's office even have reserve deputies? I mean, why not just hire 70 more deputies and have them work and not have to worry about, people working volunteering? Why even have a reserve unit?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and a lot of agencies have decided not to do that. But a lot of agencies in the U.S., including and in the state of Florida, have them. But one of the main reasons a lot of people like to cite is that it's less expensive, and that's true. It is less expensive because you're using volunteers. It's not free because the agency still has to pay for uniforms and gas and cars and extra cars to have around for when the volunteers need to drive them. Yeah. So it's not a free human resource, but it's less expensive than full-time. That's one reason. But the other big, and I think it's the main reason that agencies decide to use reserves, is because it creates this bridge between the community and the law enforcement agency. It's a way for for people who are doing other types of careers to be there and be able to see what police officers do and participate in what police officers do. It draws back that curtain that some people feel hides transparency, and allows citizens to view what's going on in a law enforcement agency.
What about for the reserve deputies? I mean, what do they get out of it? I mean, you're in charge of this whole unit, and so what do they tell you? Why do they even want to do this? Because I assume it's a lot of work. I know it's a lot of work to become one, but even when you're out there, it might just be 1 day a month or 2 days a month or whatever, but that's still time away maybe from your family and your loved ones, and so it is still time. I mean, what do they say? Why do they want to do this?
Well, they all have different reasons. And I think they fall into kind of three general areas. One, someone wants to get into policing. So they do this because they want to become a full-time police officer, but maybe don't have the work experience yet. So this is a great way to gain that experience. The second reason a lot of people do it is because they have retired and they want to stay involved with the agency and continue doing policing. And the third is just because people want to give back to their community. It's a heavily trained way of being a volunteer. It's not one of the phrases I like to use is volunteers are not cheap; they're priceless. And actually, with the Orange County Sheriff's Office and our unit especially, I really feel that our volunteers are priceless. They're really doing this for the right reasons and going out there and volunteering to be a part of our community.
So the people that are reserves, does it often happen where they do it for a little while and say, I want to do this as a full-time job and sort of switch over, or does that never happen?
Oh, no, it happens a lot. And actually, I'm sad to see them go because I lose a member of my unit. But at the same time, it's a great way for the agency to know that an individual is able to do this job and do it well because they've been through all the training. They've done the field training, and they're able to do what the agency wants done as a police officer or a deputy sheriff. So yes, there's a lot of folks that do that, and I think if you looked at the 1,600 law enforcement officers, the deputy sheriffs in Orange County, you would find a great number of them that came from the reserve unit.
So you mentioned earlier that these deputies, these reserve deputies, are fully trained just like everybody else that's on the road. My question is, they don't do it every day, and so they're not out there like maybe somebody who does this, as their full-time job. And when I was out with the deputies getting some video and watching them do their thing, they responded to calls, they wrote some tickets. Can they really go to every call that they get called to, or are there certain calls that say, okay, maybe it's time we call the people that do this full time, or they really can kind of work every call that gets thrown at them?
Well, they can work every call that gets thrown at them. However, a new person, just like a new person on the road who's a full time person, might encounter a call where they're just not 100% sure what the next step should be. So they might call another officer and say, hey, help me out. What's the paperwork that goes with this, or what's the next step? So that still happens in the reserve unit. So we ask for and get help sometimes from the full-time folks. But as I mentioned, with 50% of the unit coming from full-time being retirees, there's a lot of wisdom and experience out there, and I would say that most of those individuals could handle just about any call that comes at them. So it's a variety of experience and knowledge of what to do and whether or not they need to ask questions.
And I do know this, and I know a lot of people do this job because they enjoy it and they want to volunteer. But there is some financial part to it, and what I mean by that is they can do off duty as well. And we don't pay that. I don't believe. I don't even know how off duty works as well. But that is one of the incentives for somebody to want to continue to work in law enforcement as a reserve deputy, is that they can work off duty as well. Maybe explain that.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Just real quick, what an off duty job is when an entity, either a private entity or another entity, needs to have some law enforcement presence.
Sometimes it's a grocery store,
Sure.
or a clothing shop, or a bar, or a restaurant, all that stuff.
Right, exactly. It could be a lot of different things.
Or church.
It could be they're having a major event and they need some officers out there. And what they do is they pay the agency to have those officers come out. So the money comes into the Orange County Sheriff's Office, and Orange County Sheriff's Office is then allowed to pay deputies to work those beyond their regular 40 hours a week that they work as full-time officers. But our reserves are also eligible, once they're off of field training, to go and work those paid events. If they're keeping up with their hours, if they're making sure that they're doing all their training and volunteer work, then they're able to do it.
Okay.
They're able to be a part of that.
So, there is some incentive to want to do this. Once again, I'm sure a lot of people love being volunteers and doing something for their community, but sometimes, it helps to get paid sometimes from somebody else who wants you at their shop or restaurant.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a lot of my reserves who, and I say my reserve because I like to think of them as my team.
You're the boss.
But yeah, there are a lot of our reserves, actually, who don't work any off-duty. That's not something they're interested in. I don't work any. I haven't worked off-duty probably since about a year or two after I was left full-time.
Yeah.
But there are some people who do work a lot of it, and as long as they're keeping up with their volunteer hours and they're participating and they're staying up on their training and doing everything, we're fine with that. There's always has been, at least until coronavirus, there always has been more off-duty than the agency can actually give manpower to. So the agency is fine with allowing reserves to do that, and we're happy that they're just keeping up their volunteer time with us.
So you said earlier there's usually a 12-hour shift that you have to do per month, and then a 4-hour training session. What do you do during the training session?
So the training, every year full-time deputies have to go through what we call block training.
Okay.
And that block training consists of several days. Usually a full day might be, or a full day or two might be at the range where you're doing tactical work or firearms training. But at least one of those days is what we call administrative block. And so there's things in there where you get a legal update, a legal briefing, or maybe you get updates on domestic violence law, those types of things. And so what we do is we spread those out throughout the year, and we have those trainings at each of our meetings throughout the year. So it's saving a day by throwing a bunch of small trainings throughout the year. But we also have an award ceremony once a year. We have an inspection once a year. We get everyone together. We do our inspections as required by our accreditation, and we get the training done at the same time that we need to do for the year.
Did you say that a lot of agencies across the country are starting to maybe phase this out from their agencies?
No, I don't really think it's phasing out. I think agencies that have decided to have reserves have them, and agencies that have decided they don't want them don't. Once in a while, we'll get an agency that says, okay, we had reserves, we don't want them, or an agency that has had reserves say, you know what, I think it'd be a great idea to start one. But it's pretty level right now throughout the country as far as law enforcement agencies and whether or not they have reserve units. And actually, part of my work as an academic and as a professor at UCF is I've done some research on reserve policing throughout the U.S., and I'm actually working on a new project that I hope we'll be able to get some numbers, because right now there's no national database of how many reserve units there are throughout the country.
And I would assume larger agencies have larger number of reserve deputies. I think when I was working on the video for the Orange County Sheriff's Office, I think I noticed the one in Los Angeles, the LAPD, they have a really large one, but they have millions of people that live there.
Right.
They got a bigger pool than we do here in Central Florida.
Yeah, there's actually 3 states in the U.S. that are very big on using volunteer police officers, and that's California, Texas, and Florida. There are other states throughout the U.S. that have them, and a lot of states do, but those are the three biggest. And California is probably one of the best at the state level of managing their reserves. They have three different levels. They have either the lowest amount of training and you can do the least amount of things up to the exact same amount of training as a full-time police officer. So they have these different levels there. Another example, though, is NYPD, New York Police Department. They have an auxiliary unit, which is not the same as our reserves because NYPD auxiliary have no law enforcement power. They are the eyes and ears of the police department. So if they see something, they're supposed to call it in. They're supposed to watch what's going on and give information to police officers as they arrive. They're supposed to help people with directions and those kind of things, but not supposed to take any law enforcement action. That's very different from what we do here in Florida and what California does. Also very different. Yeah.
Does the reserve unit get accredited for anything, or is there a process for that?
We're part of the agency accreditation.
Okay.
So when the Orange County Sheriff's Office goes through CALEA accreditation, we are part of that, and our paperwork has to go in and be reviewed. Our policies, regarding reserves, our evaluations, all those things have to become part of the accreditation process.
Are we ever compared to other different agencies across the state or the country on how our reserve unit does compared to the other ones?
Well, actually, the one way that I can think of right off the top of my head that we were compared is that we won the national award. This was from the International Association of Chiefs of Police, so it's actually an international award as the Reserve Unit of the Year. In 2019, we received that award.
All right, we're reigning champions.
Yes, that's right. Well, actually, no, they've awarded that 2020 award has already been given out.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so we're not reigning champions anymore. But
so how do you win that award? Like, what do you have to do? What do they rank you as, or what do they compare you to other ones?
So IACP looks at how well you are established in the agency and how the agency supports the volunteer unit and how the community has accepted the volunteer policing. And so, we put together a nomination packet and forwarded it to ICP, and we were selected.
So who won this year? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know off the top of my head. Right. I probably should, but I don't know off the top of my head.
That's all right. Is it difficult to find people to want to be volunteers and reserve deputies?
I don't think it's difficult to find people who want to do it. There's a lot of people who think this would be a great way to give back to their community and become a part of policing. I think that what happens is, though, that the reality of how much training it is sometimes scares people away, or sometimes they just can't fit it in. It's a lot of training. So, I think there's a lot of people out there who would like to do this. And if we have any people listening to this podcast who'd be interested, I sure love for them to submit an application so we can get them moving.
Is there a cost to it? So if I want to be a reserve deputy, do I pay for it?
It depends. We can sponsor you. The agency, Orange County Sheriff's Office, can sponsor you to an academy if you do the application up front and you go to the academy that we choose. If you want to go to a particular academy because you live right down the street from an academy and it just makes life easier for you, or you want to get into the next academy and we already have all our allocation for that academy, then you might have to pay your own way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know a lot of times we work with the people at Valencia College and work with them. So if you live near there, it's probably beneficial for you.
But if you live next to another academy and you wanted to go somewhere else, it might be either difficult or impossible to get a sponsorship. Yeah.
So Ross, over the years, you've been doing this a while. Over the years,
just a little bit.
Are there certain things or certain instances where some of these reserve deputies have really sort of gone above and beyond their normal call of duty and really sort of shown off what the reserve unit can do?
Yeah, we've had reserves that have been recognized by multiple different organizations in the U.S., including the National Sheriff's Association, including the Police Hall of Fame. Various different organizations recognize them, and one of them that I'm just thinking of is ASIS recognized one of our reserve deputies a couple years ago for the work he did in tourism policing. He actually liked to work the tourist area. He found out about a family. He actually was working, and a family had been victimized and had all their belongings stolen, and had no way to pay for staying in the hotel they were in. They had no way to get back to where they needed to go, and so this reserve deputy helped him out. He got him, found him a hotel room, worked with the manager to get them a hotel room for free, comp for them, worked with them on getting them to the airport. the next day or whenever their flight was so they could get them back to the airport. He gave them money for food and was recognized by ASIS as Tourism Officer of the Year. And that was just a couple years ago. As I mentioned, we've also had recognition from the National Sheriff's Association. During this time, in particular, with the anniversary of Pulse, we had 3 reserves that were recognized by the National Sheriff's Association. 3 deputies from Orange County that were recognized by the National Sheriff's Association. And one of those deputies was a reserve, and they were recognized as Deputy of the Year. They all 3 of them won it simultaneously. But we also had other reserves that earned the Medal of Valor for the Pulse incident as well.
Was there a reserve deputy at Pulse that night?
Yeah, so there were actually our entire unit was working that night. When I say our entire unit, we don't have everybody comes out and works at the same time. That'd be 70 people all out tripping over each other. But we had a major portion of our reserve unit working that night. And we were working in Sector 2, which is the east side of Orange County. And at the end of the shift, some of the deputies had already packed up and gone home or started to go home, but there were some people who were still out late dealing with calls. And so about half or 3/4 of the reserves that were working our Sector 2 detail that night heard the call for assistance from the officer at Pulse go out. And they all responded, all the ones that were still working at the time responded to Pulse. And actually 3 of our reserves won the Medal of Valor for going in while the gunman was still inside Pulse and rescuing victims, taking them out so that they could get medical attention.
And I think that's pretty incredible. I've never heard that story. I think that's pretty incredible because, once again, these people have been trained and they really want to do this job, but it still goes back to that they are volunteers. And I think some people might say, well, you're a volunteer. It's okay. We work full time. We'll go in. But these people didn't say that. They said, no, we're law enforcement. We're going to do this too. And they rushed towards danger. And that really, I think it speaks volumes of what these people do as reserve deputies.
Yeah, well, as we mentioned a little while ago, we wear the same uniform. Mm-hmm. And so when these deputies showed up at the call at Pulse, the officers that were there ahead of them, there was no difference. Mm-hmm. Hey, you take my back, let's go help people. And they did. And the reserves that arrived later were unable to go inside because of the massive police response, as you probably know with that night. But they were able to take up positions to make sure that people stayed away, that people who had run away from the scene got medical help, those kind of things. But there were 3 that did earn the Medal of Valor because they were there as police officers that night. They were not there as volunteer police officers. They were not there as a business owner who also happens to be a police officer. They were there as police officers.
So once again, if somebody's interested in being a reserve deputy here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, they just go to OCSO.com and figure out how to do it from there?
Yep, OCSO.com. Actually, if you OCSO.com/reserve unit, and you can go right to our page. There's information there about the reserve unit, and there's also a link to the HR page on our reserve unit page that you can go to so you can see some of the more specific requirements of what they're looking for reserves.
Yeah, so if you're interested, go there, check it all out. We're always looking for people, so sign up and we'll get you all set up if you're really interested in being a reserve deputy. Ross, thank you so much.
Hey, it's been great. Thank you
for chatting with me, and we'll see everybody else next week.
Thanks for chatting.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Star. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Also, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Jon Busdeker, and this is Behind the Star.